You, Daniel.
Well, first of all, let me thank Charlie and author partners that allow us to speak in such a beautiful place. It's always such a pleasure and an honor to speak in those circumstances. So, if you don't know me, I'm Daniel Zanner. I'm based in Nice, and today I would like to talk to you about the thermal ultra wires. They are kind of my signature. As the theme is innovation, I talk to people around me, people who were doing MBAs. I asked them what innovation was all about. And this is when I got this quote: innovation is not a technological breakthrough, but it's a phenomenon of constant improvement. And this is exactly the case for Genius System. First of all, with the brackets, which allowed us to allow innovation. So I didn't know all this, but nevertheless, I experienced all these evolutions up to a modern man bringing the new bracket and raise it above his head, and this new bracket is Genius, and we work with it with great pleasure today. Thank you, Emmerich. And so this is it. You can see it here. The World Cup of brackets, it would get the Gold Cup. For sure. Okay, so Genius System is not just brackets, it's a system, therefore it also includes the wires. Thermal ultras are exceptional wires, they work very well. And Nightie and thermal ultra are probably the 3/4 of the working time, that the treatment time. And so my question is, why do orthodontists place more importance to the choice of the bracket than the choice of the wire? It couldn't work with such a good bracket as the Genius and ignore the quality of the arch wire, which makes a whole system really. And so their use is extremely recommended. 2 years ago, I talked about thermoelasticity, and I presented the complementary families of ortho partners. I described the qualities of the third family, the thermal ultra family, and they complement the osteolytic shape, the thermal ultra shape. They get 100% at 32.2 degrees, so it's below the mouth temperature, and it's sufficient so that this temperature gets the arch to work gently, and it can get to the austenitic shape in the oral temperature, and is the shape of the packet initially chosen by the orthodontist. I showed the curve of superelasticity, where you see that the thermal ultra family has a force rendering 3 times higher than what's necessary than what you need in the bracket. So when you load a wire, you don't even realize the force that is given to the tooth. Last year, I told you about the different shapes that were offered by ortho partners and their potential use through a chart. This chart has since been made, and you can actually use the chart to fine-tune your needs in the mouth. If an arch is more or less broad, you can use the different shapes. And then finally, last year, I showed you this graph, which is actually really important because it shows the differences of force when you load the wire in your brackets between a 1925 and a 1425. This is your big white arrow, so I don't really need to comment this, but obviously it's harder to load a 1925 than a 1425. You have all the different intermediates in between. But what I would like you to focus on is the small white arrow. When you unload the wire, the small difference between a 1925 and a 1425, really you have hardly 50 grams of force. So It's the same difference of 1 to 2, but in absolute terms, it shows very little difference, which probably suggests sometimes that you should open up the decision to using parallel sequencing. And this leads me to today's topic, which is the archwire sequences. The first year was at the collectionnaire, thermoelasticity. Last year, the shapes of the archwires, and today it will be the archwire sequences. So the rule, what does the rule say? The rule is written in the author partner's catalog, and it looks at the different phases of treatment, and for each phase, you allocate a type of arch, or several types of arch, in fact. If you look closely, the first phases, alignment and leveling, these are done with 2 arches, 0.14 and 0.18 thermal ultra, and they stay 8 to 16 weeks in place according to your case, and this is important to respect this. So, how is this innovative? First of all, the dot 14 night ITU has a force of 28 grams. So few arch wires or at least no wires pull so gently. So it's a first intention wire. It starts the leveling and respects the biology and the comfort of the patient. So at this stage, I don't want to have resorptions or even I don't want any root resorptions, but I want to be efficient and I want to move forward. So this arch is going to give me, this arch wire is going to give me this. This is why you have to start with this. This is the thermoelasticity curve, and you can see 1.5 millimeter, the green dot. This is where we compare all the different arch wires, and the force is 4 times lower between the force that you need to introduce it in the bracket and the one that it gives you on a flat level. So here you can see the middle of the incisors, the position of the cuspids, the class 2 here on the right, and 8 weeks later, when I put on the bottom arch, you can see the correction and the canines, 8 weeks with a 28 grams force. You just have to let them act on their own. Here, I went a little bit further because I've got a case with a big malformation, and I left the arch wire in place. This patient comes from afar, so I didn't see him very often, and the arch wire is very deformed, so I don't have to act. I'm just going to let the arch wire do the work, really. I just put a little decompression elastic chain. I took some pictures, and after 6 months, we still had the martensite. Here, you can see the arch is still deformed, but I then decided to move to dot 18. This is the occlusion view. This is 6 months. So I left it for 6 months. So don't hesitate to let your arch wires work. If they're deformed, then the heat of the mouth will be your best friend, for thermal ultra, that is. So December to June, this is what I obtained. And why is martensite our friend? Well, you saw that in the curves, it regulates the energy that's given to the tooth. And it also keeps this energy because you deform the arch wire. It keeps its energy inward, and it's then it's passed on to the tooth. So at the end of the treatment, what you need is a kind of dragster that goes very fast, very quickly, 2 kilometers at full speed, and you want to increase the ratio between pull and flexion. So it's where you want small, very quick, controlled deformations, and at the same time you have thermal ultra, which we use for much longer, probably 3/4 of the treatment time. And Are you seated, Charlie? Yeah, these are like a little urban car with a huge jumbo tank behind. You have all this energy, and you can go twice round the earth, and you don't take this person on board when you want to go fast. Anyway, then we often have comments from orthodontists saying, well, when I take out this arch wire, it's very deformed. Yes, it is deformed, and that makes sense. It is permanently deformed, just like any material on Earth, even if it's super elastic. This is chewing gum on the slide. To show you that even thermal ultra, which is very elastic, it will be permanently deformed, especially children who are not allowed to eat certain things still do. The elasticity limit is twice as high for martensite as it is for austenite. So especially at the bottom left, because this is chewing gums, and chewing food is going to deform the wire, and so it's going to reach the elasticity limit there, and it's going to deform there quicker. So these are the photos that I sometimes get, and I see them all the time. These arches are very deformed, but it doesn't matter, because when you put these, and I put the little red arrows, when you put these distally of the first premolars brackets, you see that in the anterior sector, the wire is not deformed, and that's what's important, because here you're there to protect the anteriors and the roots, and when you start a treatment, you want to do a differential work. You start with the anterior teeth, and what can be done behind is done. So then people ask me, well, why don't you back 4x4? That's what we can obtain with 8 weeks. I go up to 6. I do what I can in this in the posterior sector, and then we start with bigger arches, but we protect the weakest, which is the small roots of the small lower incisors. Beyond that, I just wanted to tell you what the patient's feeling is, because, I mean, the patient does count. He is at the heart of it all, after all, and making sure that they are comfortable is important too. So I did some sensitivity tests. You can do those in your own clinics. You take a sheet of paper with a tape on. You don't ask pain, because that's not a very good marketing term. You ask for sensitivity. Tell me the sensitivity that you have from the first to the 8th day, and you put 0, a mark from 0 to 10. During meals, outside of the meals, you get all these horrible figures, and then here I took the 29 cases on the top, 21 on the bottom, and let's look at this as bar chart. It's easier to look at. On the left, you have the absolute values per day, then on the right, averages, and then for the upper and lower. Top and bottom. The sensitivity starts from day 1. That's what we realize, and Raitan would tell us this already. 2 hours later, we get the first reaction. So you never put your devices after 4:30 in the afternoon. You start after lunch in the afternoon, and you can see that after the 6th day, you can see after the 5th or 6th day, the sensitivity is not so high, but it's always stronger on the mandible than it is in the maxilla. Then sensitivity while eating. Here it's a little bit different. The curves have moved upward. It's always more sensitive when you eat. It makes sense. So you have the same curves, but a little bit with higher figures. We can get 100 on a maximum of 190, 29 cases. If those 2 cases put 10 points of sensitivity during the day, you have a maximum of 290. So 28 gram force is already quite something. So there's no reason to pull harder. So you have to go slowly.
In summary, sensitivity starts the day when the appliance is placed. It's felt more for the upper arch. The second day is more sensitive. It's felt more when eating, and it lasts for 5 to 6 days. The second point is the 1890. It's a second level arch. or wire, and this is the super elasticity curve, which shows unloading 4 times different by a factor of 4, and it doesn't pull much. 50 grams force is not much when compared with a kunai tie. If you started with that, you had the same force, 4950, and it pulls as much as the first one that we used to use. If you compare that with the 0.18 copper nai tie, it pulls twice less. This is the case I had shown you with a lot of deformation earlier, and here it is 2 months later. And this is another case where there was extraction for the bottom arch. This is the day when I placed the 014 and the day when I removed the 018. So there were 27 weeks between the two. I let the wires function well, and there were 3 appointments. Obviously, it deforms posteriorly. They can even deform the steel wires. It happens, but less than the 014. And what I'm interested at this stage is protecting the anteriors, the single root teeth, and start working on the middle and posterior teeth. At this stage, what I do is I check the axis. You realize on the CEF that there are variations between children or adults. Here, there is a lingual version of the upper incisors. Here, there is very little movement. At the end of the 018, very little variation. Sometimes there is a movement of some of the teeth, upper teeth, and not the lower ones. And sometimes you get a 7 to 8 degree movement, upper and lower. What I'm interested in at this stage is if I've decided to extract, or if I know I'm not distracting, no problem. If I'm sort of in between and I may postpone the decision to extract, I don't want to wait too long, 9 months or 1 year, because it's going to be difficult to convince the dentist to do extractions, difficult to convince the family, and myself as well. Extractions disorganize the arches, and you need to level again. So I don't want to defer or postpone too much the decision to extract or not. And if the buccal tilting doesn't bother me too much, I can control it later on. So now we move on to the second series of wires. What does the rule say? To finish the alignment and the leveling and control the torque, you use the thermal ultra, the 014 and the 018, depending on the case. And the 1425 will be pulling at 60 grams force. So a slight increase with a continuation of the alignment and leveling. And it's almost a round wire. You can't really count on it for differential torque. This is the histogram of the forces based on the families. You see the 60 grams force here. This curve shows a plateau, so to speak, a fourfold difference. Here you have you move on to the 1825 thermal ultra, which pulls at 40 grams force. So you've increased from 40 to 60 to 80. And so you continue progressively the alignment and the leveling. But there's a 10-degree possible movement one way or the other. You see here the thermal ultra is at about 80 grams force. And there is 5 times less restitution of force. Now, if you look at the torque chart, there are people who calculate the torques. So you assume it has the nominal value. The arch wire has the same nominal value, and you do a bit of trigonometry, and you realize you have about 10 degrees both ways, which is not a lot when you want to control the differential torque. And the rule says that there are 2 additional possibilities, the 0.18 square and the 2018 square. Now, if you look at the 2020 square, how could it be an alternative in the genius system? This is my daughter with a yellow T-shirt doing acro yoga, but she illustrates a principle that you need at that stage. It's a little delicate. You want to compromise between force and control, and it's not necessarily easy to achieve. The objective is the end of the correction of height rotation inversion. You can reposition the brackets during that phase, and then you're going to continue leveling the SC, and then you move into the third order, and it's a load torsion relationship. But the 2020 at 110 grams force, is it not a little too strong for what we need? We had an initial wire at 0.18, so the periodontum will only undergoing a 60-gram force difference. Now, between the 2 copper 9 ties, you had the same difference from 40 to 110, except that here we started with the 14. And when the 2020 arrives, you've already had 2 wires working. And you can take into conclusion the sensitivity of the patient. And this is the same study as earlier with 30 cases. During meals or outside of meals, everyone notes their sensitivity from 0 to 10, and you have a maximum of 30 points per day. You have the absolute values out of 300 on the left, and then the average out of 10. It starts immediately. You place the wire. It's high. You're at 80. And then it's 1 out of 10 after a few days. It's not a whole lot. The values during meals are a little higher, and you realize that it decreases fairly quickly as well, but it's going to last a little longer. The sensitivity disappears around the 6th or the 7th day, so it's not huge. My recommendation, if we were to use this wire, were to introduce it without activation and leave it in for 8 weeks. Here it is on these photos, and I recommend to all the orthodontists to go back to golfing, since a lot of them golf, and the wire is going to do the job for you. And then at the second appointment, you do possible finishing corrections, and this is where you can use the ligating system. Now, I'm not saying what I'm not saying. I'm just saying that you can use it when you want to, and you can take control. The advantage with the genus is it's easy to ligate. You can put a chain on it. It's very simple to use. Here is a 2020 ligated in a 2228. You see that the wire is pushed down into the slot because of the ligating system. The 2020 has only 6 degrees of torque in one way or the other. Even the 1925 only has 725, 14 in total. And we're far from the 1725 or 1825. We have good torque control initially, but when you ligate, you no longer have the 6 degrees of torque because you've pushed the wire at the bottom of the slot. So it's not a 2020. It's in a 2228. It's a 2020 in a 2220. So you can have differential torquing with the ligation system, even with the type of wire that you have, or you can take control over a rotation. So with the ligating system, you can decrease the action of the wire in both directions in space. You can activate the load flexion and the charge torsion, load torsion ratio. Now, what about mesodistal versions, tilting? This is where the use of the 2020 is very useful. If ligation enables you to reduce the depth of the slot, you're never going to be able to do that for the height. So the best idea is to take the highest possible wire to control in the mesodistal direction. Here you have this wire, you have the slot, and between the two, it's 0.02 of an inch, which enables you to control that third direction. But all of these comparisons would be useless if we didn't have a good closing system. And you think you're working with a 2228, well, it's not a 2028. And we realized that when we were putting a 1925 in a 2022 or 2228 slot, the best-known closure systems, there was a 10 to 12 degree loss of torque. 10 to 12 degrees. So you can do whatever you want with these wires. It's going to be useless. So a 1925 theoretically has 14.5 degrees of torque. And the torque control is directly connected to how the closing system is designed. And in this world, there's not a single supplier who's going to be proposing a 2028 slot. In industrial manufacturing, there's always a clearance or a leeway. And you need to pick the manufacturer with the smallest degree of clearance. You know, it's 0.002 inches in one direction. And our Taiwanese manufacturer is really good in changing the dies. And it's because they want to do it. It also costs money. They're not polluted by Anglo-Saxon measurements in inches, but they're at 0.69 and 0.73 millimeters. So you do have these 0.2 millimeters in both directions. This is the reason why our friend Ephraim Medina, when he does his tests with this type of arc, is unable to close some of the flaps because he's at 0.0275. And this enables you to understand how precise the slot is. And you can produce this torque chart with 5-degree increments. You take your Genius and you put a 1925 steel, and you're going to close the slot and set it on the zero of the chart and look at it to see the movement in both directions. And you'll see you have 7.5 or 8 degrees, so it's very precise. So these are empirical tests, the one done by Ephraim and myself, but we hope that in the near future there will be scientific testing in an independent laboratory. But this gives you an idea of that. So, what is Genius? It's having a reliable bracket and quality wires, and using the adequate wire shape and having the proper sequence. My recommendation to students or newcomers to the use of Genius, I suggest you use the traditional sequence, 14, 18, 25, and those who are really experts may move into other galaxies, so to speak. So this is what we do in orthodontics. It's not ready to wear, and there may be iatrogenic effects of torques. Now, I'm waiting for all of you about 10 days from now on the beach in Nice. Thank you for your